talk about here is adaptations. So both having one's own prose work adapted to screen and TV, and then also the experience of adapting popular characters from television film, and also comic books that have been made television film themselves, into prose and what that experience is like. So we have Lev Grossman, who's the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling Magicians trilogy. That is a TV show as well on the Sci-Fi Network. And his new book, The Bright Sword, is a King Arthur tale that's been called utterly enchanting. He also, I think, was on the cover of Publishers Weekly, right? We put your picture up there. It's a good copy. Nicola Yoon is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Instructions for Dancing, Everything, Everything, which I think is now a modern YA classic. Absolutely. And The Sun is Also a Star. So her new book is called One of Our Kind, is that right? Yes, and I just read it. It's really an incredible thriller, real page turner, so please make sure to get it. And I'm going to keep this short. Next, we have Delilah, is the author of the New York Times bestseller Star Wars, Phasma, Servants of the Storm, the Blood series, and she said like so many other books. She was telling me in the hallway, like, she'll hand a card and you can just read through them. Tiffany Jackson is a New York Times bestselling, award-winning author of the YA novels Monday's Not Coming, Allegedly, Let Me Hear a Rhyme, a whole bunch of others, including 2 with Nicola, Blackout and Whiteout. And then she's here because she did a really amazing origin story for Storm. And then Adam Christopher is the New York Times bestselling author of Star Wars, Shadow of the Sith, and Stranger Things, Darkness on the Edge of Town. Fun fact, he is from New Zealand, yes? And yet all of his books are set in the US, which I just find really fascinating, or in the space. All right, let's get into it. And I wanted to let everybody, really briefly, before we talk too much about film, just give us like a one line about their new books, like their brand new books releasing at the show, and why they think that you should read them. So do you want to share what your new project is?
Okay, one line.
One line, if you can, just
okay.
Or 2.
Family moves to a utopia, which is really a dystopia because utopias don't exist. And it's called One of Our Kind.
The Bright Sword is a King Arthur novel. It's actually set partly after Arthur's death, and it's about a little group of the knights who survived trying to rebuild Camelot and kind of bring back the age of Arthur.
I'm not tall enough for this. Okay, there we go. So my next book is called It Will Only Hurt for a Moment. It is available as a reserve ARC copy of a galley downstairs in Delray booth number 1550, which you see like the giant human random house hanging from the ceiling. That's us. It is about a woman who has escaped a abusive relationship and goes to an artist colony to discover her muse and reconnect with pottery, and instead she digs up something very angry.
Hi, so my book Storm, Dawn of the Goddess, is about Storm. You don't know who Storm is, I don't know if it belongs here. But yes, Storm, we follow her transition to finding her powers and beginning to join the X-Men.
I haven't got a new book out yet, so I'm going to talk about an old one, which is Star Wars, Shadow of the Sith, which is basically Luke and Lando chasing OG of Bestoon, who is chasing Rey's parents, Dathan and Miriam.
So I'm a bookseller at heart, so I'll just also remind everyone that there's a signing after the panel, which is going to be in room AA3. So if you're thinking of leaving, write that down now.
And our books are for sale in the sales pavilion at Mysterious Galaxy.
Absolutely. So one thing I was thinking about in researching this panel is how much casting is a huge part of an adaptation, both for the authors who've had their prose work adapted, and also when you're thinking about writing in the voice or backstory of a known character, you're thinking about who has been cast, what individuals have been cast in that role on the screen. So maybe starting with Nicola and Lev, what was your relationship to your books being cast? Like, did you have any control or input on who they cast, either as the stars or the directors or the folks who adapted the work, who helped write the screenplays?
This is probably mostly germane to the Magicians. I attended a day of auditions. I was actually there in person. It is some kind of an evil personal fantasy to sit and watch one incredibly good-looking person after another go through the room and pass judgment upon them. Never to be forgotten, that experience. Mostly, I think it's little tapes and clips of the people who were auditioning. I think the main thing I took away from it is that I was really bad at figuring out who was going to be good, because they didn't do anything that I said, and the cast turned out to be amazing.
Yeah, so for me, I've had two books turned into movies so far. I had no say at all. I mean, so when people DM authors or text them, they're like, I don't think you can cast that person. It's not us. Oh my God. I think some people probably have more sort of say, like maybe if you're Stephen King or something, you get to decide. But I did not get to decide. There was one person that someone wanted to cast for everything that I really objected to, but that was like the extent of my, my power there. But I've been really happy and lucky with the people that we've chosen. I think they've done a really good job, but no, you don't get that much say.
Did throwing a fit about the person you objected to work, though, or are they in the movie?
No, they're not in the movie, but it was, like, I was so right about this.
What about the folks who were hired to work on the screenplay? Did you work with them, or did you have did you get to have say in who that was?
Yeah, I mean, for both Everything, and The Sun Is Also a Star, I did get a chance to read the first version and give notes. But that was just because Energy and Warner Brothers were being sort of generous, because once you sell the rights to your book, it is theirs, right? So they option that they get to make it. I will say the very first version of the script for Everything was really bad. It was so bad, I flung the script across the room, was how I felt. And then, several revisions later, I thought it was really great. And there's even a scene in the movie that I wish I had written. Like, I just was like, oh, this is, why didn't I think of this? So it ended up being a really positive and wonderful experience. But at first, I was like, this is why. Don't bother me get this.
I found, I don't know if you found this, but that being a novelist, it was poor preparation for the collaborative nature of filmmaking. I'm very used to having, writing novels, it's a real control freaks medium. There's few media in which you have so much personal control over what goes into the work of art. So I do remember seeing some early scripts for the Magicians and flipping out. I just needed an adjustment to understand that other people were writing for my characters and their visions were as valid as my own. I also wrote a movie called Tiny Perfect Pigs that was based on a short story that I wrote. And in that case, I insisted as part of the deal with the rights that I be the one who write the screenplay. This got almost all the bidders out of the room. But one production company did stick around very generously, and we had the extremely onerous task of mentoring me through the process of learning how to write a screenplay. It took 4 years. I don't think it was fun for anybody, but they did a really good job of it. So in that case, that was the case where I did have quite a lot of control. But for the Magicians, it was a writer's room. They did their own thing. I think I went to the writer's room twice. But they had their own thing going on. They did an amazing job.
So for Delilah, Tiffany, and Adam, you had to deal with who's been cast in a very different way. And I'll have to say, like, fans tend to be possessive or attached sometimes to the actors and their voices who've been cast in the films and the worlds you write in. What was your relationship to those figures? Yeah, go first.
So my first Star Wars book was Phasma, and by then we'd only seen Force Awakens, and I had a really unique chance to go to Lucasfilm and read the script for The Last Jedi, which it was a crazy experience. It has to be checked in and out like it's in Fort Knox. And it feels very frightening, especially the person you're supposed to give it to is gone and they're off the sides out and they've given you a 30-ounce drink and you have to pee and you're just standing there holding the script like, oh, do I take it in the bathroom? What do I do? But we chose to write that book as kind of an 1001 Nights Scheherazade story where people are telling the stories about Phasma in kind of a interrogation. So only in the last chapter do you actually get into Phasma's head. So, basically at that point we knew it was Gwendolyn Christie being completely amazing in armor. And I did get to meet her, and she is so nice, and she gives me hugs, and she smells so good. So that's the extent of my Hollywood experience. But I also had a really weird thing where a character from that book by Marani is being used in the Galaxy's Edge theme parks in Disneyland and Disney World. And so I actually walked into Disney World and met my character. Oh, that's like when Big Bird meets Snuffleupagus.
And a tiny curious your impression. I had another hat as a journalist, and a couple of times I've been assigned to cover a new Star Wars movie as it's being made. And I interviewed the whole cast, and the directors, and the producers. Nobody knew more Star Wars trivia than Gwendolyn Christie.
She's into it. She's read Phasma and she liked it. She let me assign her a copy for her. So she signed a copy for me and I signed a copy for her and then we both got emotional.
So, Marvel, how do I say this? Marvel is very protective over all of their characters, and Storm is not to be messed with whatsoever. And so I actually really appreciated the fact that while I was writing this origin story of Storm, Marvel, of course, gave me access to every single comic book they've ever had. So I was able to go back to the archives and look through and find Storm's origin story because, of course, I went on YouTube and I went on TikTok to find out everyone else's version, but I wanted Marvel's specific version. So when I was writing, I do feel like there was a lot of cooks in the kitchen, as I like to say. Like this was very much a group project. But the best group project, because one of the things that I was very adamant about at the very beginning is like, I don't want to mess this up, because people get mad when you mess up their favorite characters. And so every single thing that we put in this book is approved by Marvel. I want to say that again. Every single thing in this book was approved by Marvel. So the romance between T'Challa and Storm, everything Storm's powers, her entire family plotline, her lineage, her goddess, or Omega level type mutant, everything was approved by Marvel. So when you come in my comments and try to correct me, I'm like, well, this was approved by Marvel. Who are you gonna who are you gonna argue with? Argue with your mama, not argue with me. So yes, that was probably my favorite part of this entire experience was to actually work with Marvel and see how dedicated they are and how dedicated they were to really giving Storm a true spotlight. I don't feel like people gave Storm enough spotlight in terms of where she came from, and so this was really a passion project of mine.
Did you talk to any of the artists who've drawn Storm, or do you have a favorite?
I have not talked to any of the artists that drawn Storm. I think I probably would be have the most nerdy questions, but also most embarrassing questions. Why did you make her hair like this? Or silly stuff like that. But no, I didn't get a chance to do that. And I'm hoping that this summer I get to, when I do more with Marvel. I feel like I just totally outed myself there, but yeah.
Future panel programmers take note.
It's an interesting question. I've done quite a few tie-ins where it's based on TV or film, so obviously Star Wars, but also Stranger Things. That book was a Chief Jim Hopper kind of prequel. And the first tie-ins I did was 2 books for a TV show called Elementary, which is that modern-day Sherlock Holmes, which people probably know. And that was I grew up watching Doctor Who in New Zealand and reading Doctor Who books. So to me, that was kind of my thing, and I wrote Doctor Who fan fiction. Now that's all tie-ins, like Doctor Who tie-in fan fiction. So when it came to doing Elementary, I was immediately aware that like, these are, maybe not so much elementary, but like Star Wars, for example, like Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill, like people love Luke Skywalker and Lando Calrissian, and not only love him and know exactly those characters as they are seen on screen, but they have done for the last 45 years. So if I'm writing Luke Skywalker, it has to be right. Because if it's not right, people are going to know instantly. And they're not going to like it very much because it's not Luke Skywalker. So for elementary, going back to the beginning one, it's like, you know, Johnny Lee Miller as Sherlock Holmes and Lucy Liu as Watson. And I never thought I'd have a cover with Lucy Liu on the front of it, which is amazing because I love her as an actress. And like Johnny Lee Miller's performance on TV is so, I mean, I can say about every actor, but like it's such a specific character, like body language and like everything. And I really had to capture that because again, I knew that like, if it's not right, it'll show. Yeah. And the difficulty with things like Star Wars, especially like Shadow of the Sith, you've got Luke and you've got Lando, you know, Billy D. Williams and Mark Hamill, people have known for 45 years. You're also creating your own original characters, which are brand new to the story, and they've somehow got to stand up to these existing like, kind of legacy characters. So writing, and it's the same with any like Stranger Things in elementary, so writing this kind of tie-in fiction, you've kind of got this real challenge. Like it's a completely different form of writing to like an original novel because, you know, you've got to do a story which not only fits the brief, but fits into the universe that you've been given in a way that is original to what you want to tell as a story, but also fits that universe and fits the characters that already exist, plus characters that you create. So for me, I love that kind of stuff. It's like a real kind of like puzzle to try and solve. But like to your question, it's like the performance of the actors on screen really, I mean, that's everything. For me, that's everything. If I can get that and get it right, you know, like David Harbour in Stranger Things, like what an amazing actor and amazing performance. And like now I've got to do a whole book about him and 11. And when I was doing 11, this is the weird thing, like me and the editor, Tom, we were going through episodes of Stranger Things, like counting the syllables of her dialogue in scenes, because you're working with like Netflix. Netflix were like, well, she can't say that, she wouldn't do that. And we're like, well, she can, because in this episode, she had a sentence which had like 20 syllables and ended in, like, Tom is this amazing kind of grammatic expert, and he was like, you can't have a something non-sequential preposition at the end of a sentence. I don't know, I have no idea. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I have to say, from what I read of the Stranger Things book, I picked it up and I felt like Eleven was speaking to me. You really did an amazing job mimicking the intonations of the speech. But on the topic of fans and their attachment to characters, something that immediately came to mind to me was fan fiction, right? And what your relationship might be to that. Both the folks who are adapting from known characters, do you avert your eyes from fan fiction? Because, you know, I think before the popularity of fan fiction on the internet, the role to adapt from to be the tie-in writer was kind of sacred. Like you were the ones who were assigned and allowed to do that. But now there's all this unofficial writing, and you know, what's your relationship to that?
So when you write for a bigger property, you sign an NDA that gives you a lot of rules of things you can and can't do, and we are legally obligated to not read fan fiction in these worlds or respond to it. Because if I go reading Star Wars fan fiction and some of that leaks into my work, then suddenly we're all in a pretty bad legal binding. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you, I once wrote some Phasma Kylo Hux / It exists online under a fake name, and my daughter found it and was like, somebody wrote this, and it's so good. It sounds just like you, but it's so dirty. And I was like, whoops, Demungus could do this.
Tiffany, were you told not to read any fan fiction about Slash?
No.
Uh-oh.
No one told me to not. And that's what I mean by like, Look, I think one of the things that we all have in common is that we really deeply respect the fans of the character that we are building upon. And so that's one of the reasons why I did go and go down the rabbit hole of people's opinions about Storm. So I did I did watch all of your TikToks. I did watch all of your YouTubes because I wanted to know your opinions so I can adapt them to make sure that I respected your passion for this character. So I think ultimately, no, I did not read any specific fan fiction for Storm. Because yes, I didn't want anything to bleed into my work either, but I do appreciate how much people know about Storm or how much they also applied their own sort of knowledge, and I was able to really capture that into an outline. And I think Marvel also appreciates the fact that you guys know more than they probably do too, so.
Adam, I'm kind of afraid to think about what Stranger Things fan fiction would look like, but I'm sure it exists.
Yeah, I mean, I don't read any fan fiction, and like Delilah said, you're not allowed to. It's for all kinds of reasons. But going back to Doctor Who, as a kid growing up in New Zealand watching, it was actually John Pertwee Doctor Who, because New Zealand television in the 80s was 10 years behind everything. I was writing my own Doctor Who stories when I was 7 years old. I've still got them. And I can figure out what episode I was watching on TV that week because it's basically like a novelization of whatever the episode was as a 7-year-old would see it. But that's how I started writing. It was Doctor Who fan fiction. And at the time, this is ancient history because it's before the internet, before anything. There were fanzines which are photocopied, A5 photocopied magazines that were posted out to Doctor Who fan club in New Zealand. And that's how you met people and how you communicated. I wrote fan fiction, the stuff that was published by a fanzine was how I got started.
Nicola, what about your relationship? Have fans sent you stories they've written about the characters in your book?
I mean, I know they exist, and usually when I go on tour, someone will bring me fiction, but it's the same thing, like Delilah said, it's just, you will get into trouble if you read fiction or fan fiction, and then somehow maybe you have a story that comes out that's just like that, and then someone will have sort of a legal leg to stand on, and you could get into trouble. So I really do love that it exists, and that people are passionate, but I really can't read it. And also, there's just a part of you that just wants to make sure that you're making up your own stories too, right? You just want to be in your head about it. So I love that it exists, but I can't read it.
I don't know if this applies. Maybe of the TV show. Did you get any Magicians fanfic from the book?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of fan fiction in the world. I would wager there are a few things that do not have fan fiction of them. I love fan fiction. I can't read Magicians fan fiction. I think it's like hearing the sound of your own recorded voice or something. I have an allergic reaction. Not like this is bad, but I can't be here. So I haven't looked at it that much, but I love that it exists.
It's like walking in on your siblings in some way. Okay.
Now you made it weird.
I just finally heard what you said.
Sorry. So, speaking about stepping away from a topic, do you find you have to step away from the media side to get in a space to write a new book? Do you have to kind of get away from the world of the adaptations and kind of the fans around your two massively successful films, Nicola, for example, to start up this new book, to get into this world? And I actually want to particularly ask you because you're moving into the adult space with this novel for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, so I have a young adult career, right? So those are the movies that have been made of my books. And I think it's complicated because the first book especially was sort of pretty successful right away. And what happens when you have, I mean, obviously that's great, right? But then before you've written a book, you don't have anyone else's voice in your head, right? So you don't have everyone's opinion. Both people who love it and people who hate it, right? And so Goodreads exists, and people will tell you when they hate things and tag you sometimes when they hate things. And I think, for me, when people say really incredibly great things, that's wonderful, but also not good for art making. And when people say terrible things, that sucks, and also isn't good for art making, because what happens is when someone says something good, you kind of want to write like that again. You start thinking, oh, maybe I should just do that again. And when someone says something terrible, you think, well, I should definitely never do that. But none of it's really good for being in your own head and making art, right? So I definitely stay away from the reviews. When they come to me, I don't love it, right? The negative ones anyway. I mean, the positive ones, you can send me that all day. But I probably won't read through it too much. And then when you're successful, like right at the beginning too, it really gets in your own head, right? Because like, what if the next book sucks? And what if no one wants to buy it? And you're just never, it's great, but it's also complicated, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's very noisy, and what you need to make stuff is, for me anyway, I just need some quiet. So it took a long time to be able to like sort of shut out the world and go back and just pretend that I'm in my room and I'm just writing for myself again. And that's what I had to do for the adult book too. Is that it's a thriller, like and a horror. And my young adult books are very romantic. There's a ridiculous amount of kissing in them, because I wrote a 4-page kissing scene for like the next one. So there's a lot of kissing in those books. But the adult book is quite a departure. And in order to write that, I had to like not pay attention to what people are expecting from me and wanting, but just follow where the art is going to take you, because that's my job, right? Like the job as a writer is to tell the truth, and that was the truth of that moment, and then you sort of move on.
A lot of your fans have grown into adults.
I know, they get older, they do, yeah.
I have to say, having just come fresh off reading the book, it does seem like a romance to begin with.
Well, I mean, there is love in there, it's just, twisted.
There's a twist. Lev, I was thinking about this. The Magician sci-fi show has had a lot of seasons. I mean, it's really been going and going. How did you break away from that to do this totally new world, immerse yourself in a very large book? It's like if I brought it to San Diego, and I had to check my luggage.
I feel like I've had some sort of length shaming about the right sword. It is quite long.
I'm excited.
It's a good question. I'm trying to think. I mean, it was good in a way to feel as though I had handed the task of creating this world and owning it and supporting it to other people. Like, not that I didn't also share the task, but I was sharing it. Somebody else was also there working on it. In a way, it was quite freeing, and kind of allowed me to say, okay, those guys are going to be okay. Let's look and see what King Orange is doing. That was only a positive thing. I guess the only thing I'll add is there's nothing like getting mired in and getting into the weeds in like a TV or movie production process to make you want to write a book. You think you're done, you think you'll never ever want to sit down and write a book again, and then you get in a room with a lot of people and you have a big argument about this or that, and you think, oh, it was better when it was just me.
I actually love a big book. I always say, like, I want to know what the next book is going to be. I like have my hand on it, and having a book that large gives like a little space. You can just put both hands on it. So for the three folks who've done a lot of media tie-ins, particularly like Delilah, you've done so many different types of works. How do you kind of get out of your head with one, and then do you have to kind of put it away to get into the new one so we don't accidentally have like a world-crossing event?
Yeah, that would be some pretty weird, like if Labyrinth and Rick and Morty got together, I think we'd have it's pretty disturbing cod pieces. So I don't usually first draft two properties or worlds at the same time. I usually try to kind of first draft this and put it away, and then start first drafting another thing, and then the edits come in, and then you're just like in the middle of a Star Wars book and you have to edit World of Warcraft, and it's very strange. But yeah, it's, you have to immerse yourself in the world, and luckily, if you're working on Star Wars, I think of Star Wars almost like history. Like, I'm pretty sure that Theodore Roosevelt is as real as Anakin Skywalker. Like, prove it. How are they not? This is history. So whenever I'm writing a Star Wars book, there's like 8 research books. There's one open to like, the cross-section of a ship. There's constantly a TV show in the background, where one of the movies is on. And then, for other things like X-Files, like how many seasons of that there is, so I kind of like pick and choose my favorites when I was writing X-Files to get in the groove. But we are now in a world where you can constantly have anything on in the background the whole time, which is very nice. And every time you look up, you're like, oh, there's my friends Mulder and Scully making bad mistakes about, goat suckers in the desert. I will say one thing is that every IP has different rules. So like Star Wars has very strict rules, probably the strictest. And then something like Adventure Time, when I wrote that comic, the only rule was that you couldn't cross the Finn Jake world with the Fiona Cake world. Pretty much anything else could happen. X-Files, I had a ton of freedom. The only thing was that there was no smooching or about to smooch or thinking about smooching. So, it was very like 1950s, you couldn't stay in the same hotel room, Mulder and Scully. So you always, whenever you get a new IP, you have to say at the start, like, okay, tell me the rules, tell me what the source books are, what is canon and what isn't. When I started writing Spider-Man, I got like a 3-hour call from John Barber that was basically like I got a master class on writing Spider-Man. So it's all about like learning the rules and then getting in that little groove.
Tiffany, do you want to jump in? How do you clear your head between these universes?
I think for me, because outside of this lovely Storm book, I basically only write thrillers and horror. So this was technically my first fantasy. So I actually had to do the reverse. I had to be in the world of fantasy. So I had to watch a lot of fantasy and read a lot of fantasy in order to understand how to properly world build and make sure that my characters are as dynamic as they are in so many other fantasies that I've like read and experienced over the years. So for me, taking in the media was actually the way I was able to really learn. So I was a little opposite. Like I just wanted to, I specifically went back and watched a whole heap of like X-Men cartoons and the movies, even though, we have our feelings. But I watched a bunch of Star Wars. I had to go back and just like think about like the way fantasy really plays out. So I actually leaned in rather than left it alone.
I'm kind of the same. Recently I've been doing sort of two things at the same time, two different projects that I can't talk about, but they're both tie-ins, and it's kind of refreshing because I go through these periods, like if I'm working on something, and especially with tie-ins, because as Delilah said, you've got loads of rules and restrictions and kind of guardrails you've got to stay within, and if you're trying to work something out, that can become quite fatiguing. So I was doing two things at once. It's like, well, by the time I got stuck on the first thing, I could then switch to the second project, and then suddenly it's refreshing because like it's a new world, new setting, new characters, and you kind of just that change. It's like it's not really, like I said, it's kind of clearing your head, but it's also diving into that world, which is actually it's pretty good.
Okay, everybody watch out that there's a suspicious phone booth in the back of Stranger Things, the TARDIS landing. Okay, thank you for that Doctor Who joke. I know you are all here to talk to these authors, so I, of course, would like to talk to them more, but does anybody want to start a line, or how are we doing questions? My room monitors, do we have a mic? Or should we just all have them call out? Up here in the front in the blue sweatshirt, can you speak loudly?
Hi, Lev. I think that magicians as a TV show, like they had a lot of fun with it. Kind of like it reminds me of The Boys reminds me a lot of like kind of the way they took the premise and like they play a lot with it compared to just like your story. How did you feel when they would go to like crazy lengths that made were like very fun visually, but maybe not something that was in your original vision, like the mini musical numbers?
I will not hear a word against the musical episodes. They were always my favorites. There's a certain amount of letting go to the point where I almost felt a bit like felt like a bit like a fan. Like if I'm a fan of this show, I'm going to watch it. And every once in a while, it was that reminds me of something. Those 3 books that I wrote. but a lot of it was really having let go. And their sensibility was quite different from mine in some ways. They're very, very funny. They're so funny. They're so witty in ways that I could never, ever be. Their storytelling style, it was very antic. There would be 4 plots per episode. They would run through so much story, and I had probably a more meditative approach to the storytelling, where I would pause on the beats sometimes. They really like to keep it running, it was an adjustment. So only a couple of times when in the script stage, they maybe went to a place that I had to make a strongly worded declaration about that place, that maybe it wasn't the right place. But it was pretty rare. It was pretty rare. Mostly, I just sort of sat back and enjoyed it.
So I'm gonna ask a question. Can I? Did they just like send you the scripts and say like, is this cool?
They sent me the script. They would send me the scripts. They wouldn't say anything. They'd just send me the script. And I'd be like, was there a question that you had about the script? So I would send them, in the end, I would tend to send them, I don't know, a fair amount of feedback. But it was really rare when, it was mostly like, this is great, we could also do this, maybe this would be even greater. There were only a couple times I can remember when I sort of asked them to stop and reconsider something.
Was that a contract point you had, Lev? Was that a contract point with the adaptation?
When we did the Magician's Show, it was not a situation where scouts found it 6 months before it was published and they snapped it up. It had been in the world for 5 years before they committed to making a show about it. And even that sci-fi show, I think that it was the 5th or 6th Magician's Show that was set up, and all the others fell apart at different stages. So all of this is to say, when we made the deal, my bargaining position was not strong. We had found, there weren't people. It was not a bidding. It was not, as they say in Variety, a competitive situation. So I was in the credits. I'm listed as consultant, and they definitely consulted me, but that was as far as it went.
Can I just jump in and say, so I used to work with BBC America, and I was in the development department. We had your book as an option, and it was on our list, and I kept saying, you need to buy this. This is amazing. But and they were him and hawing, and then when the option let go, and it went to sci-fi, and it did so amazing there, I just was kind of the very much I told you so girl in the room. But at the same time, I feel like sci-fi did it justice the way that it probably wouldn't do. And I love BBC America, those are my people. They really did it justice. It was an amazing show.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I remember talking to the BBC people, and it was great. There's a wonderful timeline where that went forward.
Yes,
not our own timeline.
I was in the room, kept saying but I love this book. What are you doing? Just do it for me at this point.
Let's see, hands up. How about right here in the front?
When you have something that you've written that is purchased, I assume you don't know much about the team that is going to be adapting it. When those people are finally announced, or however that process works, is there ever a moment of glee and or panic that the people, you ended up with Sarah Gamble, who was incredible, but you may also end up with names that you look up their IMDb and everything's a 4 out of 10. How do you handle that relationship and process?
I mean, you gotta dance with who brung ya. I mentioned that there were 5 or 6 iterations of the Magician's Show, each one with a different group, and there's a wonderful BBC timeline where we went forward there. There's also some darker timelines when we went through with some people who I didn't understand how they had any connection to the source material. I got very lucky that was the one that worked out.
Nicola, jump in.
I mean, I think you have to, you get a little bit of, I got to interview some directors, some writers, and then you just have to take a leap of faith in a way that the people are really connected to the material. You know, it's insane to me that movies actually get made because there's so many people involved, movies and TV shows. Like Lev was saying, what's great about novel writing is you're in your room and it's you and you're in control. You can make a movie and it can still go wrong. It can fall apart at the editing stage, right? Like maybe they filmed all the scenes and it was perfect, and then the editor was bad. There's just so many people to actually getting something that's good out is a miracle. But you know, mostly people are doing the right thing. Mostly people are trying to make a good thing, and sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you just don't.
Yes, you were very eager with the hand up here in the blue shirt. Please. You. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is, do you look at city of origin for your characters and all those things? So those get changed, and like, how do the soundtracks? Like, what is your relationship to that? Both for the folks who've had your works adapted, and also those are great questions actually for the tie-ins, like how you think about the sort of voice and city of origin of the characters and the sound. How do you represent that in novelizing a work? Anybody want to jump in? Mm-hmm.
I'll just say for casting, I think actors will fly in and audition from one, doesn't matter what city they're from, for everything. The director was very passionate about the music, so she chose all the music, really. And also, a lot of the movie studios have tie-ins to recording companies, and so they try to choose from their catalogs. So there's all this complication. Stuff gets made. They get made in a very strange way, you guys. A lot of things are just practicalities. Like, we need to choose from this music catalog because we own Sony or whatever. But yeah, for the acting side, people will travel, but everything else is kind of up for grabs, I guess.
It's funny. This is my experience with the movie side, but often there's not a ton of actors who would work for the role. Or for magicians, Jason Ralph. There's no show if Jason Ralph didn't say yes to that part. He was the only guy, and if he was from some crazy place like New Zealand, we'd just move the whole show to New Zealand because it had to be him. So I feel like sometimes it's the story, it's the casting that gives it, but sometimes it's the story that gives because you just need that key person. It is incredible that anything ever gets made.
I love the idea of thinking about the soundtrack as a tie-in, though. When you were writing your novelizations, did you think about the sound of the original productions?
It's interesting. When I was doing Stranger Things, one of the key features of Stranger Things is that it's a period TV show set in the 80s, and my book, Darkness on the Edge of Town, is set in 1977. But how do you convey that in a book? You can write a period book, and the thing with Stranger Things is that because it's so visually retro, and especially not just music, but also TV that people are watching, or little features and things that just kind of, you blink and you miss it on TV, but it places it in that time point in a way that is not forced, like this is 1984. So when I was doing that for the book, which is set in 77, I really, there was a whole draft phase. I do maybe 2 or 3 drafts normally, but there was a whole draft phase of putting stuff in. And I was working with Netflix as well, and I was like, well, what popular TV ads were running on TV in 1977? What could we see on a screen, or what could we hear in a store? Because I had to inject that flavor into it, which was, I think it kind of worked, but it was a whole other consideration. It's not just I'm writing a book set in 1977. It's it has to be Stranger Things in 1977.
What about you, Delilah and Tiffany? Do you think about the Foley effects of it? And then after that, we have only time for one more question after that from the audience.
I've got synesthesia, so my senses are all kind of twisted up, so I'm always very deliberate in all of my descriptions and try to hit on all of the senses, including noises. But I can tell you the coolest, soundtrack noise related thing related to IP is when you work for something like Star Wars, or have a series with Minecraft called the Minecraft Mob Squad. You don't just get like, oh, we just chose a random narrator and they read the book. Like when you buy the audiobook of a Star Wars book, there is John Williams music in your audiobook. There is pew pews, there is laser lightsabers, and they have hired like an incredible, like a working actress. Like I think January LaVoy did, the Phasma book. And then in Minecraft I have 4 characters in that series, and they hired 4 actors that see it all through. So it's really cool when and I had no part in that. No one asked me. They're just like, congratulations, here's your baby. And I'm like, oh. So it's really fun if you are an audiobook person, because audiobook is reading and I will die on this hill. These are great ones to listen to.
Tiffany, anything to add, particularly since you have production experience, apparently, with the BBC?
Yes, I worked in television for 15 years. Actors are actors for a reason. Like, I don't know, there's a lot of shows where there's British actors playing Americans better than Americans can actually be Americans. It's the wildest thing. But I could say this is a rumor, but I remember hearing that the original voice for the X-Men cartoon, the original voice was a white woman. And they eventually hired, after a couple episodes, a black woman to play Storm. And I always say, you definitely cannot replicate the flavor of a black woman. And therefore...
That actress is here. She has a
Yes.
booth on the floor, like the original voice actress
Yes.
for the black one, not the white one.
Everybody got worried for a minute.
I just didn't want to because this could be a rumor. Don't tell Marvel, I'm not here.
Okay, last question, and then just remember, these folks are signing afterwards, so everyone else can keep their questions and come with their books.
Aspect of time work, do you ever face an issue when you've written something and then Lucasfilm turn around and go, we're not going to let you do that, somebody else did them, or there's a character in Stranger Things where they're like, oh no, we just decided that we're going to kill them off in the next season, we can't have them. How do you deal with that when you've actually put the work in to do it?
I think that's like just part of the job. It's like you have to do what they tell you. I think Delilah will say as well, Star Wars is very interesting sometimes to work on for those reasons. Stranger Things was kind of more fluid, I think, because my book was kind of set in the past. There is one thing, my sole contribution to Stranger Things that actually went from book to screen, I gave Eleven her walkie-talkie, which is like a super important plot point. But whenever I see it in whatever episode it is, I'm like, I did that.
Has everybody seen The Acolyte? Has anybody not seen? And if you haven't seen it, plug your ears for a second. So here's a concrete example for Star Wars. And my last book was called Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade. And it was about watching a good Jedi fall to the dark side as an Inquisitor. But it was happening as they were writing The Acolyte. And of course, Star Wars always has movies, books, TV shows, and video games all happening at the same time. The story group corrals us all like cats in a room full of rocking chairs. And so I had a scene where these force-sensitive moths were attacking a Jedi, and I thought they were so cool. I was like, these are my corpse moths, they're Sith moths, and they're like, you can't have moths. And I was like, what do you mean I can't have moths? There's no moths in Star Wars. And they were like, shh, you can't have moths. And then I watched The Acolyte, and I was like, they stole my moths. So it happens.
Tiffany, anything? Did they tell you had to change your entire book around after they planned out the next?
No, I don't think I wasn't allowed to. It's like Disney rules, right? You can't curse, you can't smoke or drink or any bad things. And that was, and yeah, it's a job, so you have to follow the rules. And I respect them, so yes, I'm absolutely going to do the job and do it well.
I really want to thank our panelists. This was a fabulous conversation.